G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder with Mags, and welcome back to the War Thunder development server. So, this weekend was a rather interesting one. Gaijin has finally put up the destroyers for us to be able to take a look at, and they seem to have changed what they were planning to do. The initial announcement for War Thunder naval battles, the boats as they were, was for primarily torpedo boats to make up the core of the gameplay, with the possibility of destroyers being added to the game at rank 5 as sort of and what you would expect from the previous trees that we've already seen. You know, aircraft are props from rank 1 through to rank 4, with jets appearing in rank 5. The less obvious change in War Thunder tanks, where you have general tanks from 1 to rank 4, but rank 5 is sort of taken over by the more modern main battle tank design. Well, this dev server introduced the destroyers. This is the tribal class, and interestingly, this is not a rank 5 ship. The tribal class, first laid down in 1936 and commissioned in 1938, is a rank 2 battle rating 3 destroyer. It's armed with 3 main turrets, each containing 2 120mm naval guns, a second turret containing 2 102mm guns, a quad 40mm turret, 2 20mm turrets, and 2 quad 50 caliber machine gun turrets. And all these guns are supplemented by a quad torpedo tube mounted in the center of the hull that can rotate either to the left and right hand side, firing a maximum of 4 torpedoes. So, a rank 2 destroyer. Now, this has some pretty clear implications. Clearly, Gaijin are no longer thinking of destroyers as being the jets of naval battle. You're thinking of them now as being, well, to compare this against tanks, it appears that destroyers are going to take on the role of the heavy tank, while PT boats take on the roles of the light and medium tank on the naval battlefield. I am completely cool with this idea, because the first thing that I will say about the destroyers is they were actually quite a lot of fun to drive. However, there were some balance issues that I did notice in this particular test, and I will come to those a little bit later. But first, let's just have a little bit of a talk about the destroyers themselves. We're specifically talking about the tribal here. First things first, it is surprisingly quick. It's a little slow to get off the line, as you would expect. This is not a light ship. The stat card has it at 2,500 tons displacement, which is actually pretty damn close to what the real one was on a full load. However, once you've got it up to speed, it motors along quite comfortably. It can cross the map in a quite reasonable amount of time, and the ship itself is surprisingly maneuverable once it's up to speed as well. I had little issue dodging most of the torpedoes that were fired at me while I was driving the ship, and you will get a lot of torpedo launches at you when you are sailing around in this scene. But of course, the ultimate question is it fun? This is probably the #1 question, because the PT boats weren't all that fun on their own. They were described by many, and quite rightly so, as being self-propelled anti-aircraft guns on water. And to be perfectly honest, they still sort of are. The destroyers, however, are a lot more fun. They feel actually quite a lot like driving battleships in World of Warships, for example. However, with much faster firing guns. You do have to check your elevation, you do have to aim towards your waterline, you do have to apply a certain amount of lead to the guns, because the larger caliber shells do have a lot longer travel time, and over the distance that you're firing directly at the ship is likely going to result in a lot of misses. This is a hell of a lot more interesting gunplay than the PT boats simply get close to the target, aim at the hull, hold down the left trigger, and then run the guns from left to right down the hull to destroy the required number of hull pieces in order to sink the ship. And what do we have here? A sneaky little Wellington trying to get a torpedo run on me. Denied. Now I'm going to head around the back of the iceberg here to engage this destroyer, but my primary goal is to slip over into the center of the enemy side of the map and start engaging those cargo ships, because they are the primary objective of this map. So, anyways, the gunplay is a hell of a lot more interesting in the destroyers. Now, I'm sure you would have also noticed just then, my guns, or my ship, taking a rather great dislike to the side of that iceberg. This is because that AI has now been integrated into the ships. The destroyer's anti-aircraft guns are now AI controlled, and they were trying to fire on that Wellington, but currently don't understand that there is a terrain piece in the way, so they were just firing into the side of the mountain. So, clearly the AI needs a little bit of work to deal with line of sight, which is something that Gaijin's AI really hasn't had to worry about before. But for the most part, they do their job well. I've had them shoot down my fair share of aircraft. I've also had them let a couple of aircraft through. They're, well, think about like the AI gunners on any bomber that is currently within the game. Sometimes they do the job, sometimes they just don't do the job well enough. But you can take manual control of these guns if you choose to, if you need to take over it itself and either direct the AI guns towards other ships, or you can manually use them to try and shoot down aircraft, so it's not really an issue. And I do actually like the fact that the guns are now being directed towards aircraft that should be via the AI, and it is very useful. I have had times where I've been getting attacked by an aircraft, and I've been trying to focus on another destroyer with the main guns. The multitasking there is very helpful. So, what about the repair functionality on the destroyer? In the bottom of the screen you'll see 6, 7 and 8. This is the fire extinguisher, the repair parts and the repair flooding options for the ship. What Gaijin has done here is actually fairly interesting. It shouldn't be overly hard to work out what each one does. Fire extinguishers for fire, repairs, which I've just activated now, which as you can see takes a little under 2 minutes in order to run a full repair of the ship, repairs your damaged components, and flooding will repair the flooding. However, these have an effect on the performance of your ship. You will notice now that I've activated the repair, the reload times on my guns have been reduced. This is to simulate crew abandoning the gun positions or the reloader positions and moving to manage the repairs on the ship, reducing the performance of the ship's weapon systems. Now you can activate the fire extinguisher, the repairs and the flooding all at once should you take a massive hit of damage and need to address everything straight away, but each of these will increase the significant reduction in performance that is experienced by the guns as it simulates more crew leaving the positions to deal with more of the issues that the ship is currently having. Which means using these repair functions is now a tactical choice that you have to make. Do you absolutely need to repair this battle damage that you have taken right at this moment, or is having the guns operate at a higher level far more important at this point? Can your ship handle a couple of minutes of flooding without going under to keep those guns firing, or is it absolutely imperative that you repair that flooding right now, otherwise your ship isn't going to be in the battle for much longer? Or in the case of multiple layers of damage, can you afford to lose or take the reduction in fire rate on the weapon systems, the reduction in performance on the weapon systems, and repair that engine and put out that fire at the same time? I actually really like this idea because it makes you think about how you're going to manage your repairs in the ship. And as you saw, the repair time is not insignificant. This is going to be around 2 minutes that your ship is going to be performing at a lower level as a result of your choice. So you really do need to think about what do you absolutely need to do right now and what can wait for a little bit of time until maybe after you've finished killing this ship or managed to disengage from combat. Now, another thing I was pretty happy with in this particular test was the gun rock. Now, I tested this in both the PT boats and on board the destroyers, where you would expect less gun rock, of course, and things are much more manageable now. The last one of these tests I got involved with, the guns were all over the place. Even on relatively calm waters like you see now, it felt like I was trying to aim the guns in the middle of a hurricane. They rocked all over the place in a manner that you just wouldn't expect the guns to rock in. Now, well, they're very predictable, they're very smooth, they're still there, so it still requires you to time your shots, but overall these feels much nicer than the previous test. Now, the last part to probably talk about is ship survivability. The destroyers are not like PT boats, where it doesn't really matter which way you turn your boat, you're going to get penetrated and you're going to get shot to hell. The destroyers you can actually angle. Playing the destroyer defensively against incoming fire felt a lot like trying to play a battleship in World of Warships. Angling your hull did seem to have some effect, or at the very least it minimised the areas that hostile ships could potentially do damage to. Likewise, as you can see here, going broadside to anything, including these cargo ships, as they have quite dangerous defensive guns, not a fantastic idea. It exposes your entire side, increases the chance of you taking damage, so manoeuvring the ship was quite important. This was only, I think, the third battle I'd played. I was still getting my hands on exactly how the destroyer performed, and still learning its guns a little bit as well. But I'm achieving my goal here. My goal was to do damage to the cargo ships. I've now got 4 torps in the water heading towards those 2 cargo ships, and I'm bringing the guns over to engage the next cargo ship at the moment. I've tried to angle the hull slightly against the destroyer that's coming, but I'm more interested at this point about doing as much damage as I possibly can. So, to summarise the destroyers at this point, they have far more interesting gunplay, they're much more interesting to drive, they are much more interesting to play defensively, and they force you to make some interesting choices in regards to how you're going to manage your repairs. It's simply not a case of clicking the button, get the health back, clicking the fire, make the fire go out. The choices you make in regards to repair are going to affect exactly how your ship is going to be performing over the next couple of minutes of battle, so you will need to think about what you're going to do before you do it. Otherwise you may debuff your ship to repair it and leave it in a situation where it's just going to get destroyed. This is all good news for those who are looking forward to War Thunder naval battles and have been disappointed with what they've seen so far. And there's Torpedo 1 in the first cargo ship, so that drops them down to 4 ships remaining at this point, and there's the torpedoes into the second cargo ship, which brings the enemy team down to 3/8. So they haven't destroyed any of ours yet, they've only got 3 left to go. But anyways, as I was saying, that is all good news for everybody who was hoping for something more out of War Thunder naval battles, because up until this point the biggest complaint that I've seen is that the gunplay wasn't interesting, the boats weren't particularly interesting to drive, and there wasn't really much to do except point and click. There was no real thought that went into manoeuvring the PT boats around. You've got quite a bit more to think about when you're driving the destroyers, and this can only be a good thing. It's also worth noting the maps themselves have also been improved. The size of the iceberg seems to have been increased, and their density seems to have been increased as well. So there is more options for sailing around now, more cover to hide your destroyers or your PT boats in. Now, speaking of PT boats, at the start I said that the destroyers have introduced some slight balance issues to the game, or at least what appears to be a slight issue. So, this test involved 2 nations. You had the British forces and you had Soviet forces. Both nations had access to 3 vehicle choices. Both of them involved an aircraft. The British had access to the Wellington with torpedoes, the Russians had access to the IL-4. Both nations had access to a Rank 2 Battle Rating 3 destroyer. Obviously the British had the Tribal. I will show you the Soviet one in the next video. And both nations had access to a PT boat, and this is where the balance issues come into play. The British PT boat was the Dark Class MTB, and I'm going to engage one of these right now. Now, quickly looking at the stat card here, you'll notice a couple of things. This is not a Rank 2 PT boat, this is a Rank 4 Battle Rating 5.7. Now, assuming that War Thunder Naval Battles is going to use exactly the same matchmaking as the tanks and the aircraft, the destroyer and this PT boat would never actually be able to see one another in combat, or see the same battlefield. The battle rating gap between these 2 ships is just too large. Now, you would think the advantage would be in the higher tier vessel, but that is actually not the case. I both engaged MTVs and, well, all the patrol torpedo boats, including the Soviet ones, which the Soviet one's name eludes me at the moment. But regardless, I engaged these torpedo boats in a destroyer, and I attempted to engage destroyers while driving these torpedo boats. And, well, despite being a vessel from a higher battle rating, they are just really not all that effective against the destroyers. First, it comes down to the guns. The Dark MTB is armed primarily with a 40mm cannon. This just does insignificant amounts of damage when trying to engage against a destroyer. Now, obviously, the primary weapon on board a torpedo boat would be the torpedoes themselves. But as you can see, even with only limited experience on the guns, as I said, this was about the 3rd match that I played after the servers went live, and I'm already getting these shots relatively close, and the second these shells get on target, 1 hit and you vaporize the torpedo boat. You only have to hit them once, 120mm guns. At no time was I ever torpedoed by a torpedo boat, even when they were trying to engage me multiple boats at once. I was able to kill them all long before they got within a range where they could conceivably hit me with their torpedoes. Driving as the torpedo boats, I only ever managed to successfully destroy a destroyer twice, and both times I was blown up. I released the torpedoes at roughly where I thought a number of destroyers were going, and released the torpedoes at an extreme range, and it was pure luck that they actually hit and that these destroyers didn't turn away. Neither time did I survive. Both times I was just one shot by the main guns of these destroyers as soon as they realised that I was actually there. Even with a significant down tiering for a high battle rating PT boat, they're just not very effective against the destroyers. The destroyer's power level is just so high in comparison that they're a nuisance at best. At worst, they're just free points and free credits for whoever you shoot. And to be clear, this isn't a modelling problem for Gaijin. The torpedo boats should explode if hit by a 120mm gun, let alone multiple 120mm shells in a volley. They should have to get within a certain range to release their torpedoes, because their torpedoes are only move at a certain speed, so they're going to have to be able to get line of sight. And a 40mm gun against a destroyer is not going to be overly effective. You need a larger weapon to be able to take out these ships with any form of reliability or speed. So this is exactly as it should be. But it brings about the question of how is Gaijin going to balance the power of a destroyer against the power of a torpedo boat, especially when you cannot rely on players grouping together. Multiple torpedo boats attacking at the same time could be very dangerous, but you would rely a team in War Thunder to show a rather high amount of teamwork in order to be able to make that happen. And, well, we've all played War Thunder, we know how that usually goes. And I actually get myself killed here. I'm spending so much time trying to pot shots at these Furies because I've got nothing else to shoot at, that I completely miss something else that's coming in on me at the moment that's going to cause me a slight issue. And there it is there. I have an IL-4 that's flying directly down the front. I didn't notice it at this point. I thought it was over near the, well it is, it's over near the cargo ships. I didn't realise it was actually vectoring in on me, otherwise I would have brought the guns forward. It's going to represent the one and only time an aircraft successfully managed to torpedo me in this entire test. Did a bloody good job of it too. Came straight down the nose where my rear AAA cannot fire on him. By the time I realised he was there starting to manoeuvre, he's already got the torpedo in the water, bring the guns around, fire the shot. He kills himself, the torpedo explosion blows him up too, but well done. But too little too late, we've already got another destroyer that's in amongst the cargo ships at the moment. The enemy team is down to 1 and this match is about to come to a close. So anyways, what could be done to try and balance these two ships out? Well, the first thing that crosses my mind is potentially doing exactly what they've done in realistic tanks, removing markers from enemy team aircraft and ships. At that point, you're still going to be able to see the ships sailing around in the water, but it's going to come down to the situational awareness of the captain of the destroyer in order to be able to deal with the torpedo boats. You're going to have to see them coming. You're not going to be able to rely on the map or the radar or a big red box on your screen to tell you they're there. You're going to actually have to look for them. And a torpedo boat is not particularly large. Using the map and the terrain environments, the icebergs in the center of the map, they should be able to maneuver around and get close enough to get a sneaky torpedo volley off and then get back out without the destroyer captain realizing, swinging those main guns around and just blatting them out of the match. Other than that, I'm not entirely sure what else they can do, because as I said, this isn't a modelling problem on Gaijin's end. These two ships are performing in relation to one another exactly as they should. It's just the PT boat is so underpowered in comparison to the power level of the destroyer that the two don't balance, and that will cause problems down the line. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you've enjoyed this brief look at ships and a little bit of a talk about it. I do have some video of the Soviet destroyer and PT boat, as well as some video of the Dark MBT as well. I will probably have them up a video in the next couple of days. Until next time, click that like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, fly smart, fly safe, and I'll catch you in the skies.